Hello everyone, my name is Michaela Norris, and this is my presentation on a differentiation strategy for gifted learners, project-based learning. So just a little overview of what this presentation is about. We're going to talk about what is project-based learning, or PBL, that's another acronym for it, the steps to project-based learning, the requirements of project-based learning, the benefits, using project-based learning with gifted students, primarily is what we'll talk about. An example of a lesson plan that has project-based learning with gifted students, and then kind of just a conclusion and summary to summarize all the major points of the presentation. So just to start off with, what is project-based learning? Project-based learning is an approach to teaching in which the students learn collaboratively and in a real-world environment. The teacher scaffolds the students and intervenes only when needed by asking those guided questions, so just acting as a facilitator. Project-based learning involves the students working together to complete a project in which aligns with the original curriculum being taught. The project should be applicable to the real world, in which the students have to implement real-world skills to complete the assignment. This approach is much different than the traditional textbook and worksheet style of learning. It also requires a very open and positive classroom culture with enhanced classroom management. So that's just a little bit about project-based learning in the background. Here are the steps of project-based learning, 1 through 5, and obviously there is more smaller steps in between, but this is just the major ones. Identifying the student's learning first, planning the specific learning activities and evaluating what the students understand. The third step, putting the plan into sequence. 4, creating that timetable. And 5, planning for conclusion or a summary to wrap everything up. And here's just a little bit more in detail. So the first step, like identifying that student's learning, creating those learning objectives, knowing where your students are, having clear learning objectives to plan out the entire project itself. The second step, planning the specific learning activities and evaluating the students' learning. So like having knowledge of your students' likes, their dislikes, being aware of their motivations, their interests, their prior knowledge, what they already know, what they need to know, all those sorts of things. The third step, putting it into a sequence. So having that organization, setting goals, making sure it's all planned out so it goes smoothly. The fourth step, generating a timetable. So having that organization, having a time frame for each element of the plan, so that way you stay on task, on track, and everything goes smoothly, but also allowing for flexibility. There is going to be times where things have to change, things have to shift, so allowing for flexibility within that timetable that you create. And then the last part, planning for conclusion. How are you going to highlight, review, and summarize all of the pieces that the students have completed? And then how are you going to check for understanding? So that assessment piece. How are you going to assess the students' learning within the project that they complete? Here's a few requirements of project-based learning. Positive classroom culture. There has to be positivity within the students and the teacher. Clear directions. There's lots of moving parts. So clear directions and expectations. Well-planned lessons. So just kind of like we talked about, having that organization and that time frame so everything has a process. Clear learning and task expectations. Again, just making sure everything is clear to the students and it's clear to you as the teacher. Efficient classroom management. The students are up, they're moving, they're working collaboratively with peers. So having that management of your classroom so it doesn't create chaos is important. A student-centered learning environment and then the second one kind of goes with the teacher as the facilitator. So the students need to be learning within their group, within themselves, and the teacher's just acting as that guide, that facilitator. They're there if you need you, but they are more student-centered. They're using the resources they have to answer their questions and learn within their group. Scaffolding, so again, providing those resources to the students. You as the facilitator or the guide provides their scaffolds to them. There is challenge within project-based learning. That is the whole point of this, is to provide a challenge to them, provide a project that creates them with a challenging task. Collaboration is another requirement where they're working together. Choice, having the students have a little bit of choice in maybe the task that they complete or the topic that they choose. So having some element of choice within their project. And then also having timely feedback. So them not just completing the project and you grading it, but them having feedback and constructive feedback that they can use for the future. Here's some benefits of project-based learning. It teaches collaboration skills, just like we talked about them working with peers. It teaches many life skills, presentations, public speaking, creative thinking, all sorts of life skills. It teaches critical thinking, so it does provide that challenge, so that critical thinking piece. It engages the students, so it's very fun, it's very engaging, they're up, they're moving around. The students can relate to the assignment because of the connection with the material. It's real world, just like that second, they find purpose in it. It has a real world application to it. Students are motivated and eager to learn. Also creates students to be lifelong learners, and the students retain the information much easier because they are engaged, they are using those critical thinking skills, and they do find that purpose in their learning. So several of the things that we just talked about is also with gifted learners as well, using project-based learning with gifted learners. So how is it beneficial for gifted learners? It's a great differentiation strategy. The students are working in groups, they're working in pairs, there is flexibility there. So it easily provides that differentiation piece for those gifted students. It promotes critical thinking and creative thinking skills, which is very important for gifted students to be able to extend their thinking skills beyond just the regular classroom. It allows for peer collaboration and sharing of high quality ideas. So a big thing for gifted learners is being able to work in groups, work in pairs, having that culturally diverse atmosphere around them to be able to share those high quality ideas that they may not be able to share with their regular peers in the regular classroom. It provides an extended learning opportunity, so they're able to push their limits a little further than just the traditional curriculum in the regular educational classroom. Just like I talked about before, it's flexible. So there's flexibility for multiple learning preferences, motivations, and knowledge levels. So within gifted learners, there is students that are going to have different preferences, different motivations, different likes, different dislikes, and even have different knowledge levels of different subjects. And this provides the flexibility for all of those things. It also allows for multiple formats of evidence of learning, or that product that they produce at the end, that learning task. There's multiple forms that they can provide for that evidence of learning. So here I'm going to talk about an example of a project-based learning lesson plan that can be used with gifted students. Here's just a little overview about the project-based learning lesson. The grade level that I chose was 3rd. I have implemented this in my classroom. The subject area is reading and English language arts. I listed the materials here, and this is more of like a book study type project within their group. The duration is about 20 days or 4 weeks. And in the lesson overview, this kind of tells you a little bit about it. The students will read and use the novel The Lemonade War, which is a 3rd grade level book, to create a presentation, activity, and assessment to teach their classmates about the 2 to 3 chapters they are assigned. The students will work in groups of 3 to 4 students to create the project before they present to the class. So I'm going to go in a little more detail through the design process of this project-based learning. Having to identify the standard, so integrating those gifted skills and standards within those curriculum standards, identifying the learning outcomes like we talked about before, analyzing the student participants and knowing those learners, assessing the learning, identifying the learning project, making sure it's real world, it's integrating those life and real world skills, choosing a layout, so like what kind of group size, group and style, how are we going to group those students, creating a rubric for the learning product, create and identify the resources, so those scaffolds for the students, creating that timeline, how will they work on the project, and when will they work in groups, when will they work individually, allowing time for conferences and feedback, gathering feedback about the lesson, and then evaluate, analyze, and revise for future uses within this lesson. So after designing each of those pieces, actually implementing and having that process as well. So this is kind of goes through each day or each section of the days of the lesson that I created. So on day 1, we would introduce the novel and explain the project. 2, presenting the groups and assigned chapters, and the students getting assigned groups for discussion. Day 3, the presenting group works in groups, and the remainder of the class reads and completes the vocabulary assignment. On day 4, that presenting group finishes their drafts, they get their feedback. The remainder of the class finishes their reading and assignments while also giving feedback. The presenting group revises their work after receiving feedback. And then on that day 5, that presenting group of chapters 1 through 3 presents the assignments while the remainder of class participates. The other groups follow that same process of days 3 through 5, just like the first group did of chapters 1 through 3 for each of their chapters. And the remainder of the class also follows those same steps for days 16 through 17. On day 18, 19, I will kind of conference with them in groups and individually. And then I also left the day 20 as an optional day to finish any that was needed for absences or whatever reason that might be. And I also included kind of more of a detailed version of days 1 through 5, just to kind of give an overview and kind of more explanation of what's happening, how each of the moving pieces are going. And here is days 16 through 20. Again, it just gives a little more detail for each day. All right, in summary of project-based learning with gifted students, project-based learning is a strategy in which students learn collaboratively and in a real-world environment, and that is with gifted students. Project-based learning promotes problem-solving, critical thinking, and creative learning thinking skills, which are all effective ways of learning for those gifted learners. Project-based learning is a great differentiation strategy to extend the learning of gifted students. And finally, project-based learning with gifted students allows them to utilize their higher level knowledge to enhance their gifted traits and their talents. And here's a list of resources that was used.